What is up, guys, and welcome to the South Coast. On today's video, we're installing the intake horn and grid heater delete from SPELAB on the 2014 Ram 2500. Let's get to it. Alright guys, so before we get started, just wanted to disclose that SPELAB sent me all of these parts. They reached out to me, said they would like to do a collaboration, so they sent me all of these parts at no cost to me. All they asked in return was that I install them, let them know what I think about them, and put this video out. So that's what we're doing. They're not paying me for the review. They're not paying me for making the video. They did send me the parts free of charge, but other than that, I'm not being paid. Before I agreed to this, I made sure that they agreed to the fact that I was going to be able to speak freely about these parts. Made sure that I could say what I wanted to say about them, so I'm not being coerced into saying anything I'm not supposed to say, or that I wouldn't say otherwise about these parts. I want to make sure that's very clear to y'all. Just go ahead and tell y'all that. So let's look at these parts. First thing is this intake horn. This thing is pretty sweet. Finish on it's pretty good. The machining looks pretty good. Basically just a cast elbow. They machined all the mating surfaces. Looks pretty good there. They sent some wiring harness extensions and a fuel pump or a fuel line extension. I think that's the fuel line for the #1 cylinder to sort of get around the intake elbow, the different design on the intake elbow compared to stock. They sent plugs to put in the fuel rail once you get all the fuel lines disconnected from it. Keep anything from getting down in there, which is good. Little bag with all the plugs for the holes that we're not going to be using, bolts and all that. Also sent all the different gaskets, hex little extension tool. So one of these bolts in here, you got to go through this hole to get it put in there. So it's kind of a tricky little spot to get in. They send you the extended hex tool to do that. So that was nice. On the grid heater delete plate, pretty simple, just a piece of aluminum milled out for the shape it needs to be. They did etch their logo in it, and this whole thing's anodized black. Looks pretty good. This part of the kit also came with gaskets and these block or standoff little bushings for the fuel rail, I believe. They also sent me this EGR delete kit. The truck has previously been deleted just because it's a farm race truck. I race farms with it. So I'm not going to use every piece part out of this kit, but I will be putting this block off plate on the new intake elbow. I think that'll look pretty good. So all of these parts look good. They look comparable to any other engine parts like this that I've seen in the past. I've looked at a few different kits for doing this just over the years, and everything looks comparable. So while the truck's still cooling down, I just drove it up here. We'll go get this intake elbow prepped. There's some plugs that need to be installed, so we'll go do that now. We'll go do that on the bench inside, and yeah, once this thing gets cooled down, we'll start installing. Alright, we're going to put a few wraps of thread tape on these plugs. I don't believe the instructions tells you to do thread tape on these plugs, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. I don't want any boost leaks. Felt like a lot of thread tape, but let's see how these threads feel. It felt pretty good going in, so may ought to make sure you get enough thread tape on these plugs. They're supposed to be pipe threaded, pipe taper ports. That one didn't really get tight until sort of towards the end, so I'm going to err on the side of putting more tape than I think I need. Check this one. See what this feels like before we put. It comes with this plug here with an O-ring. Get that on there. This plug has a groove for that O-ring, so I'll make sure it stays in there. I'm just going to put a little dab of oil on this O-ring to lubricate it as it seats. Make sure we're not tearing it or extruding it or anything. Alright, as it's coming down, you want to take a look around, make sure the O-ring's seated in that groove, make sure it's not pushing out anywhere. Just snug this up. Remember, this is an aluminum casting, so don't be putting too much force on anything. Alright, so those are all the holes plugged. Let's grab that block off plate for the EGR inlet and get it put on. One goes there, one goes there. Get this guy aligned with that guy, make sure they're facing the same way. Let's see, are these going to be the right bolts? Maybe these don't need washers. Alright, we're going to get started on getting some stuff taken out. Obviously, I do not have the cover plate, the EGR tube, and all that stuff on the truck currently. like I said earlier, it's previously been deleted. So really I just got to start with getting the wiring harness cover, fuel rail cover, intake elbow sort of stuff out of the way. So we'll get started with that. Alright, there's this one last electrical connector back here. Kind of hard to get to. Alright. So there's a few connectors on that side of the engine, a couple on this side. Get all of those undone so we can get this harness out of our way. That's good. All right, one important thing to note, where these fuel lines go into the head, there's an adapter fitting there. You want to make sure that adapter fitting doesn't spin. The instructions tell you to use like a white paint pen or marker to sort of mark a match mark on it. I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to watch them carefully. If they spin, you just sort of tighten them back up, make sure they don't leak, but we'll just keep an eye on it. Alright guys, so as you can see, we got the front 5 fuel lines pulled out. That 6-cylinder fuel line, we just loosened it up at the head connection, unscrewed the connection at the fuel rail, and rotated it up out of the way. That one is a bear to get to, hard to get the wrench on it to loosen it, so that's all we're going to do with it. Unfortunately, the caps that they sent to plug off all these holes were too big. So they didn't fit in there. I'll send them a message about that, and hopefully they can remedy that in future kits they send out. But I'm going to go ahead and get the shop vac in here and try and suck out as much of the junk and gunk, and there's some leaves and stuff in here. Get as much of that out as I can, and then I'll do a good inspection on this fuel rail to make sure there's nothing down in there, because that would be a bad day. Alright, I was able to fiddle with that connector a little bit more for the, I guess that's a fuel rail pressure sensor, and I was able to get it off, so we'll be able to get that fuel rail. I got it all the way out here. I'll be able to make sure it's fully cleaned out, good to go. So we got a couple more bolts, and then this plate should come off. Alright, keep that so you can get this in. Here. Focus on it. Right here. Alright, that should be. Alright, first thing, I'm going to tell you there's something straight out. the next step after getting the old plate out of there, they say the next step is to apply some spray adhesive to this gasket, so you can, I guess, so you can stick it to the new plate to where it's not dropping and falling off on you. So you can go ahead and do that. This is just some Loctite spray adhesive. All right, that's done. Alright, so they point out in the instructions that this tab needs to go to the back, so opposite end of your opening. Just get that aligned, make sure all these bolt holes line up. Alright, that looks good there. Now we need to, on the old manifold plate, there's a sensor. We need to pull it off of that one and put it on this plate. Alright, taking a look at the old plate, you see we got this sensor. I believe that's like a air temp sensor, looks like it. But I wanted to look at this. So this truck has 284,000 miles on it now. I'm very surprised at how clean this heater grid is. Usually you see pictures of these that are all super sooted up, real gross, real nasty, a lot of buildup on them. But this one's looking pretty good. And one big scary failure for these engines is this heater grid bolt loosening up and falling off, and then it rolls down into cylinder 6 and wipes out number 6 piston and cylinder and all. But luckily mine was still good and tight. Was in no danger of it coming out, so that's pretty cool to see on a truck with 284,000 miles on it. Alright, I just did one last inspection, make sure everything's good and clean. Everything looks good in there. So we're going to try to drop this in. Got some of the stock bolts here ready to go in. The back corner of this one's also 140 wire harness protection. Alright, next step, we got to get the fuel rail back in here. It's got some standoffs for the 4 spots where it bolts down, so we'll get those put in here, get the fuel rail plugged back in, and start doing that. Got that connector in there. We just need to get the standoffs and the bolts. There we go. Alright, first one is this fuel return line. It's got this banjo fitting. You got to make sure you get this washer in between those two mating surfaces. Alright, and then our fuel feed line. Make sure to tighten that one back up down at the fuel pump. To loosen it to rotate it out the way, make sure it gets snug back down. Alright, it's all the fuel lines reconnected. At this point in the instructions it says to put that rubber isolator cover back on, but I'm going to wait on doing that. I don't want to get back to running the truck and have a fuel leak and not know it, so I'm going to get some of these electrical connections hooked back up, and then basically just not put that rubber isolator back on so I can inspect for fuel line leaks. Alright, since this intake air temperature sensor was moved, they give you this extension harness. So we'll get that hooked up. Alright, and remember we had these plugs on the passenger side of the engine that we disconnected earlier. Alright, we'll get these two vacuum tubes or PCV tubes, whatever they are, hooked back up and just push on. Get this other connector in. So the instructions say don't put this connector in yet because you got to put that rubber isolator in there, but I'm going ahead and connecting it because I'm not going to put that rubber isolator in there right now. Alright, we got another couple things to swap over from the old intake to the new intake elbow, so let's go do that in the garage, then we'll come out and put it on. First thing we need to swap over is this nap sensor. There's a little Torx bit, a little T15. That thing's pretty gross. Very carefully clean some of the stuff off of it. They make spray to clean these out, but I don't have any. Probably something I'll have to clean out or replace in the future. That should go right in there. Reuse the same factory screw. Alright, that's that. Now, the only other thing should be this throttle body sort of deal. So, they make another part that eliminates this. You really don't need this if you're doing the whole EGR delete thing. So basically it's just like it looks like a throttle body spacer that you would put on just a gas vehicle, but there's no throttle valve in it. You don't need the throttle valve in a diesel. But I don't have that part, so I'm just going to swap this on over. Alright, the kit comes with a new gasket, so we'll just go ahead and use that. So looks like this will only go on there one way, which is nice. Keep me from messing it up. Alright, we got everything we need swapped over to this new intake manifold. One thing that I'm just realizing, I should not have put this plug in yet because one of the bolts that hold the manifold on, or hold the elbow onto the manifold, has to be threaded through there because it's sort of underneath here. So I'll have to take that back off. We're going to leave it on for right now until I'm ready to put this last bolt in. But we've got those two bolts. One goes here, one goes on that inside. And then these four longer bolts with spring washers. Those go on these four outside spots. I think it's time for me to go get this put in. I'm going to do the spray adhesive trick. We're going to get some spray adhesive on the gasket, stick it onto the elbow. That way we know it's going to be there. And I think that should be it. Alright guys, missed it on the video, but there's a little bracket that you bolt on to the intake manifold, and then your joist or your dipstick mount bolts right onto it. So just reuse one of your factory bolts, and then they have this other bolt that they supply. So that's that. And we need to make sure this boost tube is good and seated all the way around. Alright, that's there. I think we've got everything else plugged in. Like I said, I'm going to wait until I get the truck. I'm going to wait until I get the truck fired up and verify we have no fuel leaks before I put that rubber isolator cover back on. But that should be it. I'm not 100% sure what to do with this old grid heater wire. Probably going to wrap it up and make sure it's insulated so it's not going to arc out on anything, and I'll probably just tie it up out of the way in case I ever need to come back and add that heater element bolt in there. I don't want to completely remove this if I ever need it, so I'll get that isolated and wrapped up out of the way. Alright, got some heat shrink. See if we can get it to go over this. Alright, so that's good and insulated. I'm going to get it zip tied out of the way. We should be good to go. Alright guys, well that's going to wrap this one up. We got the SPELAB grid heater delete plate, intake manifold with EGR block-off plate put on there. Install went pretty good. It took me right around 3.5 hours or so, so not too bad, all things considered. The instructions are very helpful. They have a lot of good pictures in there highlighting which bolt they're talking about and connector and all that sort of stuff, so definitely use the directions. I went off script there a little bit, but I think everything worked out well. We got it all put in there. A couple things to keep in mind: make sure you keep that intake manifold area clean. I vacuumed it out 3 or 4 times just to make sure there wasn't anything that was going to get sucked into those cylinders and destroy the engine. 2, make sure you keep your fuel rail clean and your fuel injector connections clean. Whenever you're putting those fuel lines back on, make sure you clean the mating surface. Make sure there's no sand or grit or anything in there before you make those connections. We're able to do it. Seems like all the injectors are working properly. and there's no fuel leaks, so that's good there. Other than that, pretty straightforward install. If you have any sort of mechanic skills, you should be able to do this. Nothing too crazy to this, but I'm glad to have eliminated that grid heater, eliminated the chance of dropping that grid heater nut down into cylinder number 6 and wiping out the engine. So definitely think it's a good upgrade. Appreciate SPELAB sending me these parts to make this video and sort of let you guys know about them. So anyway, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. I'll probably post an update video on these parts as I drive with the truck a little bit and make sure everything's working well. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up if you like this video. Drop me a comment down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Alright guys, as always, I hope y'all have a good one. We'll catch you next time down here on the South Coast.